everybody. It is Tuesday, December 19th. We are here live in the Finger Lakes One TV studio with Jim Sinacropi. And I've got a fun podcast planned for you today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Melissa Killeleagh. I am a mom. I'm an entrepreneur. I am a member of this beautiful Seneca Falls community. And I love doing this podcast once a month to bring stories to you of a few things that matter to me. Women who are making the world a better place, men who make a difference, all things out and about in the community. That is the Finger Lakes region. And ideas and inspiration for you to take home with you. So today, here we are, December 19th. I can't believe it's already a few days until Christmas. The holidays are right around the corner, and we are about to touch on some topics that we are told to leave alone, especially at the holidays when gathered with our families. We'll be talking a little bit about some politics, a little bit about religion, spirituality, but I have some really special guests here today in the studio. With us, we have Reverend Leah Ntuala, who is a woman who makes the world a better place, and also Rob Harding, who is part of the Citizen in Auburn, New York, and he is here representing his column, Eye on New York, and as a member of the Citizen community, where he is both a political blogger and an online producer, or I should say more than both, and also, what else?
I think you covered everything.
Okay. All right. I got it all. All right. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Super excited to have you here today. So I love the fact that as we approach the holidays, we're going to talk about some things that really matter to me, matter to both of you, matter to the world at large. And so I'm excited just for our viewers to start to get to know you a little bit better. Some of them will know you, some of them won't. But Leah, to kick off our segment on women who make the world a better place, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, if our viewers know you, they know that you are the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church of Seneca Falls. Yeah. You have a very powerful voice in our community. Leah is present at many tables when it comes to all things that matter to the community of Seneca Falls and the Finger Lakes region. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and how you ended up here in Seneca Falls.
Okay, well, I moved to Seneca Falls in December of 2010, almost to the date right now. That's when we moved here 7 years ago. I am the mother of two incredible sons, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, Mason and Atticus. I'm married to a wonderful man, Simon, and we moved here and love it. I serve as the president of the board of the House of Concern, our Seneca County's food pantry and thrift store. I'm a member of the Lake to Lake Women. I am a planner on the Women March. I have served in the Child and Family Resources Board, as well as I lead the congregation at the First Presbyterian Church here in Seneca Falls.
I love it. And I got to meet Simon for the first time this weekend.
Yes.
I've had the pleasure of meeting your boys previously, which is wonderful because my son is a big fan of your son Atticus. But it was really great coming over to visit with everyone from the congregation. Is that something that you do regularly?
So, yes. Every year, every Christmas that I've been here and serving the church, we have a manse open house. It's an opportunity. The manse is the building, the house that the church owns, and they allow us to live there. It's an awesome benefit of my job, but they don't always get to enjoy the house that they take care of.
Yeah.
And so it's nice every year to have them into our house. We usually have it the same day as we have the Christmas pageant at the church for the kids. And then they all come over to our home after following the worship service. And it gives them a chance to see things. That gives me a chance to bake, which I love to do and don't get to do as often, as my husband does not eat sweets. And I love them, so I try not to do it too often. But so it gives me a chance to do that and be a hostess, hone in on my own inner mom what the things my mom taught me and display them, and I love it.
It was great. It was so great to be there and to see you in your element. Yeah. So one of the things I love to talk about that really speaks to my heart is your passion and purpose. Now, clearly doing the work that you do, some of that is self-evident. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your passion and your purpose specifically, being part of this community, being in the, in the work that you do. Yeah.
So theologically, spiritually, the place that I come from is, I'll call it table theology for a lack of a better term. In the Presbyterian Church, we have two sacraments, communion and baptism. And I know that I learned how to be my best self around the dining room table of that I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And then tables I've been to since, and some don't have an actual table, but like that invitation to come, it was at the table that I learned how to disagree with people and still love each other. Mm-hmm. It was at the table that I learned there's always space for somebody to come in and be a part of the gathering. There's room to learn something new. There's space to cry and get angry and to laugh until you cry. Those are all things that happened around the table that I grew up in. It was way more than the meal. The meal gave us the fuel and the strength to do the work, but that intersection, that interchange of ideas is what I continue forward to, what called me to want to do ministry. And it's the type of environment I try very hard to create in the place where I serve, this idea that all people are welcome. I mean, I happen to serve in a church that said that long before I came there. Mm-hmm. It's where the Equal Rights Amendment was proposed by Alice Paul in 1923. It was a church that made a commitment prior to my going there to be open and welcome, affirming congregation to the LGBTQIA community. Those are things they called a pastor. I'm married to a man who comes from Kenya. He's a Maasai. So they called for the first time a woman to the pulpit. I'm the first woman to ever serve there who's married to a man who's a naturalized citizen now. Mm-hmm. And they were, so they already had the open table philosophy, and we've just continued together to be intentional in how we proceed forward, to be intentional about what we serve, how we present it, and making sure that it's welcome. And while we don't always agree with each other, we still create a loving environment.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It's interesting to me because one of the things that I deeply admire about you is the fact that you can come to any table with both the ability to hold space and really give grace for other people to own their voice, but also to be very strong in your own, which is wonderful. I think, quite often in life, we sort of assign these roles to people like, she's the caretaker and she's the one who speaks up and she's the one who does this. And so what's interesting to me is having chatted a little bit over the weekend and now kind of understanding a little bit more about where the passion for this work was born. I'm thinking about you around your dining room table, and I'm thinking, you were one of 5, you said?
I'm one of 5.
Okay. So, and your husband's one of 9.
Yes, and we stopped at 2. But yes.
But yeah. You also have the rest of,
it's
your
a lot
church
of extended family.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit more about that, like how those skills came to be. Like, when was the first moment that you knew that, you would find your way up into, the front of the room at First Presbyterian Church of Seneca Falls?
Some of it I will say I fumbled into more than it was a graceful walk to the pulpit. There was a lot of pushing and pulling along the way. My father is an ordained Presbyterian minister. My mother was a social worker. And so I grew up in the church environment, so I kind of saw the underbelly of things that happened. And so people were more human to me in that context. than they were this idealized notion of what a pastor is, or what, more than one's titles. Those are titles we carry. Those are offices we hold. And that means that we have specific responsibilities and duties, but it doesn't mean that we're somehow better and or worse human beings. Being respectful of the offices we hold is something I learned, some by the example my parents set, and some by what they didn't do, and made me want to be able to do in my line of work. A lot of it is travel. I traveled a lot. It's another passion I had. I mean, if I had an expendable income, it would be like a huge expendable income. It would be spent on trips around the world and art. I love art and I love travel. But the part of travel that I love is the welcoming and learning new things. We all it has helped me to realize that none of us own the truth. None of us we don't own much, actually, right. But we all deserve the truth. And so traveling around has helped me to let go of some beliefs that I thought were the only way, only to learn and to be given a new perspective. That's what an open table or an open door house and being exposed to a variety of contexts helps you to understand. Like, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya. That's how I met my husband. I worked in the public health sector, water sanitation, and HIV/AIDS education. And in being a part, initially you go to another culture or another place, and it's really easy to see the sins of that culture. To keep in my wheelhouse of vocabulary, it's really easy to see societal sins of another nation when you are an outsider. It's not always easy to see what some of those sins are when you're entrenched in the environment that you grew up in. So whether that's your home environment, your state, your nation, it's really hard to see that when you're in it.
Right.
And so having your culture reflected back at you while learning and discovering a new culture, and when you allow yourself the freedom to learn and say, that's what I'm here to do, is to learn and not to judge, you realize that life's one big anthropological study.
Yeah.
And like there isn't like a good parent and a bad parent. We're all parents, and sometimes we make good choices and sometimes we don't. And that's the same thing with nations and across the board. It's easy to think that we're not a repressive society when we look at another nation, say like Saudi Arabia or something like that. But when you've gone and you've experienced and you've learned why you have come to make the decisions you made, it allows you then to look at your own nation with a different mindset and perspective.
Absolutely. Completely different lens. Yeah. So I have to go on a little tangent here because last month, Susan James was here. She's an attorney who has recently gone back to school for Ayurvedic medicine and yoga and is really working on uniting those two things. But she talked about how her husband and her ideology are so very different. Like they're very different. They're fairly polarized, in fact. But that what they bring to the table is this ability to have really difficult dialogue in a way that honors and respects one another, right? And they're like continuing to have this, the same conversations over the years, right, and evolve together. And what's interesting to me about that is when you were talking about having that lens, being part of Peace Corps, being in Kenya, and meeting your husband, I have to imagine the conversations that the two of you had, and the very different perspectives that you both came from. So I am just curious now. I want to know a little bit more about the love story that brought Simon to the United States.
So yeah, Simon and I met on an emergency food and seed distribution. I was partnered with World Vision, was my non-government, my NGO that I was partnered with as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I lived in a very famine-stricken area. And so outside of our regular programming, we had to have food and seed distribution, which means we had to bring in extra staff to help that to happen because our regular programs also had to continue. And so Simon was he was the driver for the extra staff that came in because he came from the same village as the gentleman who ran my program. Mm-hmm. And so he got the job. And I will say my husband is the most strikingly beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, I was struck by him immediately. But then he has an ability to, I'm very high strung, very anxious all the time. And my husband is the calm in my storm. And over the years, that has only helped me to begin to institute better calming practices. Mm-hmm. But when you have a job where you're so public all the time and you don't have much anonymity, it's nice to have a place to turn off and someone to not take it personally if you don't want to talk, or if you just want to sit and binge watch whatever on Netflix and you don't have to explain that, and learn new ways of being. Mm-hmm. And so Simon helped me with that. So we became really good friends, and unbeknownst to me, he had to go return to his village because, like I said, it was temporary. So he went back to where he lived, but he took some of my CDs and books because he's sneaky. Because he wanted to make sure that we would see each other again, but I was completely oblivious to that action. I was like, oh yeah, you want James Joyce, Ulysses? Sure, here it is. And he's like, I don't care. No, I don't. But whatever, that's what he took, along with some CDs, because he wanted to make sure we would have to meet up again and he could give me back these things I had loaned him. And then I returned stateside, and I realized of all the people that I had met and become friends with, that Simon was whom I missed the most. So I sent him a journal, and we started mailing that back and forth. Mm. And, an email and conversations too. It's much, much better connection. WhatsApp is a life-saving app.
Agreed.
For international communication, which didn't exist at the time that Simon and I were courting, for lack of a better term. And then one day a marriage proposal came, and my youngest brother was like, "That's very Jane Austen of you, Leah." And I was like, "Well, I'll take that as a compliment because she's my favorite." So, and then it was a long process of fiance visas and all of that. And I learned the underbelly of the immigration process, which we won't go into here. It's a whole other tangent. But so that's sort of how we came to be. But I think we were very lucky. All couples come from different cultures because we come from different home environments. Even if you grew up in the same town and you were neighbors next door, you still come from different cultures. But when you come from two different countries, you get to name your cultural difference as like, whoa, which I don't know is a gift that all couples have to have. So therefore you don't necessarily recognize it. Mm-hmm. But that's what's happening. And so there's a gift in being able to name the cultural differences and learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I got to see the tip of the iceberg when you were talking about him being that, the calm in the middle of your storm, because on Sunday when we were at your house, there was no storm, but, you were moving around, sort of socializing with everyone, and Simon was just calmly working his way around the room, keeping his eye on you, just like, but in a good way, right? Yeah. It was beautiful. And the thing that you said to me that was so interesting, and I don't know why I have to share this, but I do, was the fact that despite the fact that you grew up worlds apart, there he was in Kenya, and there you were in Ohio.
Yeah.
And you grew up eating Norwegian pancakes.
Yeah.
And he grew up eating his Kenyan pancakes.
Which are the same pancake.
And they're the same pancake. How crazy is that?
Morning. So we grew up on literally halfway around the world from each other, eating the same Christmas breakfast. We just add bacon in my house, and syrup, which they didn't have there. But that's the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we're gonna shift a little bit, and one thing I wanted to ask you about is your legacy.
No.
So, what is the legacy that you want to leave this world? What is your legacy for your family? What is your legacy in this life? Yes, I asked tough questions.
Yeah, it is a tough question. So a lot of it stems from the, in the conversation, Jesus was asked, what are the greatest commandments? And he said to love God and to love your neighbors. Jesus gave us a new commandment to love as he had loved. And so I hope that that's a legacy that I can continue to pass on, that in my life, the things that I do and the reasons that I do them stem from the unconditional love that I feel from God, and call God whoever you want. I happen to call God by God as a name. Some people talk of God as an energy, a connectedness. That for me is what it is. And so that I hope is a legacy I leave, that people will know that the decisions I made and the choices I made came from a place of love, and that if it's going to be unconditional, you do it not because you're getting anything tangible in return, but because it's the gift you've been given. You have to share it. And I hope my kids understand that. It doesn't matter if the person that you're sharing your coat or your food or your, money donations or whatever, or the line at the grocery store, whatever it is, that what they experience from you is love. And I'm not always able to do that. But I try, and I hope that my sons and the people who know me feel that, you don't take care of people because you expect that they'll take care of you in return, but because they'll take care of somebody. Right.
It's so beautiful that this segues right into the fourth question, but we're going to hit pause because we're going to talk to Rob for a second before we get there. But I have to tell you, your legacy is already well underway. And, this very small piece touched me just this past week, so I received some news in the last couple of weeks that renovations are being done in my building in downtown Seneca Falls, and that I would have to move in the middle of winter, which hasn't been a bad winter, so that's not so big a deal, but in the middle of holidays, with a month's notice and with an 18-month-old. I had no family in the area. And I walked into this event at Seneca Falls Library a few days later. It was, I love it.
Coffee
and coloring. Yeah, the coffee and the coloring is actually for the adults, and the kids go play. And Leah looked at me and said, "You can live with us," right?
Yeah.
If that didn't just shift my world, because this community is incredible, but those moments are absolutely unforgettable. So thank you. Your legacy is here in my heart. So
thank you.
All right, so we'll press pause on love. We're going to come back to it. We're going to move over to Rob for a second. More than a second, because he's got a few things to say too. So Rob Harding, friends, is a man that I met recently. He came to interview a room full of women at an executive board table in Generations Bank. That from that room we could see the statue of several of our suffragettes, and he absolutely noted, immediately how great it was that here we are in Seneca Falls, the birthplace of women's rights, with this incredible group of women talking about the Women March of Seneca Falls, which is on January 20th. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I wanted to meet with Rob because he comes from The Citizen, which is a publication in Auburn, New York, but also focuses on Ion New York, which is really a much more broader, it's a broader perspective on politics not only in our region, in our state, but like within the context of the greater framework of the United States. So I'm super excited to have you here today, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
I would also love for you to share a little bit about your background and how you ended up doing what you do, because I found it to be an interesting path. So if you share with our viewers a little bit more about yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I going back to as a kid, I always had an interest in politics and history, and when I went to college, I had this mindset that I was going to get my business degree. Business is where you make the money, right? So
of course,
I was like, I'm 18. This is what I want to do. So I enrolled and focused my major on marketing. And I went through the first couple of years, and I did okay in school, but I was just thinking to myself, this isn't where my passion is. This isn't, it just didn't seem to me like this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I fortunately had a great advisor within the business department I went to SUNY Fredonia, and Dr. Franklin Crone, who has since passed away, but he said to me, and he was in business but had a political background. He said, well, if that's where your passion is, you should do what you love. The money is secondary. That will come to you. It's better to enrich your life than to enrich your pockets. And so he, with that advice, I started to pursue more focused on political science, but then journalism as well. I always had a thing for writing, and it all started with a simple letter to the editor to my local newspaper, and the editor there, who I'm still friends with to this day, he said, you should write a column for us. So I started writing a weekly column at junior in college, which was
Very
cool.
Nice.
And shifted focus. He offered me an internship the following summer, and from there I decided that was the path I was going to pursue to become a journalist. And unfortunately, I graduated from college in 2008, which is, of course, the height of the recession, just a terrible job market to get into. I have a Gmail archive full of emails that I sent out, hundreds of them, that people were like, well, we love your resume, but we're just not hiring right now. So,
Yeah.
But luckily for me, 2009, the fall of 2009, I'd applied to The Citizen. They had an online producer opening. It was a newly created position, and I applied. The executive editor, Jeremy Boyer, who's still the executive editor there today, said, I really like your resume. I want to bring you in for an interview. And one thing led to another, and I got the job. Moved to Central New York in December 2009. I've been here ever since. So
it's great. What I loved about your story was the fact that how you started with The Citizen wasn't necessarily like you seeing this picture perfect position that was exactly what you wanted, but you've molded it into what you're looking for. So you are able to have a greater voice when it comes to politics. So if you could talk more about that too, I'd love to know more about your passion and your purpose when it comes to what you like to learn more about, what you like to focus on, what you like to feature, like what's in your heart when it comes to those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, the one thing that drives me primarily is to inform the public. It's simple in our profession. You think that's just comes naturally, but it really isn't. I mean, you have to know the topics you're covering, whether it's at the local, state, federal level. For example, right now we have the tax bill that Congress is considering, and there's many. It's a 1,000-page bill. So how do you help people out there understand that better? And that's what our job is, and getting to know things like that, legislation or policy proposals better, and to relay that information on to in our case our readers, but broader media, TV viewers, radio listeners, podcast viewers or listeners. So that's really been something that drives me. I think for a lot of people, they just assume that that's what our job is. But, it's more than that. You really want to get into the nitty-gritty and really relay to people what, this legislation's about that might affect them, or, what candidates for public office stand for. It's just not as simple as going to their website and saying, oh, well, I think I understand them. Well, views evolve over time. There might be a new issue that comes up that isn't on their website or isn't on their social media accounts. So that's really something that drives me to stay on top of that, to make sure that the people that follow me, whether it's on social media or the people that read my column or stories in the newspaper daily, are getting that up-to-date information, the new ideas that are out there, and the new positions that are out there.
Mm-hmm. And you're speaking to one of my languages. So I went to graduate school for public administration, and it was at a time when our program was really evolving out of the political science department at SUNY Binghamton. And one of the things that I think is so challenging when you're talking about really getting the information out there and crafting your message is being able to do it in a way that doesn't live in one particular slant or represent one particular ideology. I mean, there's so much out there that we're inundated with every single day when it comes to news, right? But it's coming from one particular angle or one particular viewpoint or one particular lens. And so being able to really sift through information like the tax bill and think through, how could this impact people and different demographics? Like, what is really happening here? So I can appreciate all of that. So thank you. Can you talk a little bit more about how Eye on New York evolved and what you love about that?
Yeah, no, when I was hired at the Citizen, one thing that was kind of mentioned as kind of a secondary responsibility was that I would have the ability to launch a political blog. That was something certainly I was interested in doing. My primary responsibility was to oversee the website, be that kind of like a webmaster almost, but only on the content side. So that was the primary vision that they had, but they also opened the door to political reporting. So I launched the Eye on New York blog almost immediately. It was within my first week, I think, and that was just trying to get a snapshot of what our local state and federal representatives were doing, keeping tabs on them. But not long after that, it evolved into a weekly column. So I've been writing a column every Sunday since January of 2010, which has been
a lot of columns.
Which is fun. Yeah, so a lot of columns, hundreds of them, which is it's a good feeling to know that now that when I first started out, sometimes it was hard to find them. Now they're featured on the front page every Sunday, which is a good feeling. But with the blog evolving over time, and just the way my position has evolved over time, really it's become my primary responsibility. So it's flipped entirely. I'm really looked upon, to cover the tax bill that's happening today, as we speak. Writing stories on that at the state level. We have a legislative session coming up in January, previewing that and focusing on the state budget and other issues that arise. So in a traditional 40-hour work week, it's probably 3/4 to 80% of my time. I work more than that for sure. So, but it really has evolved into my main responsibility, and I enjoy it. It certainly keeps me busy, and during election years even more so.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to tell you, I won't miss the budget briefings, though. I won't miss them. So before I left to pursue, my own entrepreneurial lifestyle, I was the Seneca County Division of Human Services finance manager, the fiscal services manager. And so it was my job to put together and monitor this $20 million budget that served Seneca County, working with state, federal, local sources, taxpayers. So my job was to make sure it was really maximizing what was available to us at the state and federal level so that the local taxpayers were not, being hit so hard with all of the incredible mandates that were coming down from federal and state government. So every third week of January, I would go to Albany and have to sit through all of the budget briefings and then the final after everything was passed in April. So it's very interesting. And I'm just happy to be here with all of you and no longer doing that. Yeah. I was definitely always passionate about learning about the philosophy and the ideas and the thoughts behind what was driving the budget and whether or not it was congruent with what was actually being passed. But the actual numbers themselves, I finally just got to a point where it was like putting together one of those sliding tile puzzles, and it's enough. All right, enough about me, though. Back to you. I want to know, what is your legacy? What legacy do you want to leave?
The legacy I would say I want to leave is, from my professional standpoint, people being able to say, he was someone I trusted. That I knew I could turn to him, whether reading, whatever, and he was someone I would turn to, for information. There's, especially in this day and age, there's so many different sources out there, and more and more you hear from people who say that, I watched this, but I quit doing it because I wasn't getting enough information, or I read them, but I don't do that anymore. And so I don't want to be in that group. My hope is to be remembered for that I gave it to people honestly, and this is the breakdown, without any sort of agenda or opinion blended in, that this is what the facts are, and you can decide for yourself whether that's good or bad. Right. Personally, it's simple, but just being remembered as a good person. I feel like I think every person that's come through the Citizen is a close friend of mine, and they'll say that I wasn't difficult to get along with. We're still friends. I get Christmas cards from people who I worked with 4 or 5 years ago that we might see each other, if we're lucky, once a year, but we still talk over social media and send
keep
cards.
That connection.
So really that's what it comes down to for me, is just really simple, being someone that they could trust professionally, but also personally, just a good friend, good person, good husband, good uncle for the time being, so until kids arrive, but yeah, I think that's how I want to be remembered.
It's so great. And I absolutely love the fact that just about all of the people that I bring together are people who are looking to create, or are already creating, a legacy of who they are, right? It's who you are being in this world, not what you are doing. So that's a huge part of the story of my journey, is spending many years focused on these external milestones of what life is all about, getting the career and the raises and making the money and, buying the house and doing the things, right? And I really had to sort of abandon that when I walked away from the 9-to-5 and stepped into my own business, if you will. And the biggest lesson I've learned over the last 3 years since I did that is that we have to be more and do less, right? Like that is literally the key to a good life and to being able to really come together in community in a meaningful way, right? And so the fact that we've got a legacy of love, we've got a legacy and faith, and we've got a legacy of trust, and we've got a legacy of being a good person, that speaks volumes. And I'm just grateful for both of you for sharing that. And what's interesting to me also is the fact that right now the 2 books that I'm reading are Love Warrior by Glennon Doyle, which you might actually, have you read that, Leah? Mm-hmm. You might like that. And The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, which, have you read that?
No, but I have heard of it, yes.
Yeah, you might appreciate that. It was Gwen Weber McLeod who turned me on to that book. So All right. So on to my fourth question, which really came about as a result of this article that I was reading. So I had my hands on this spiritual publication that did an interview between someone from the Buddhist community, I think, and CNN's Van Jones. And I believe the title of the article was "Love is What America Needs." And they were talking about how the struggle that we're in as a country right now, the struggle that is so very real, the great divide that we experience, and the separation and the us versus them mentality, is this inability to really bridge that gap with love, and it really connects so deeply and resonates with your message, Leah, because if we could all learn to live in that unconditional love of our faith and be able to share that love with our community and to love all people with that, what a better world we would live in.
Yes.
Right? So I would love for each of you just to share your thoughts and reflections on what that means to you. If I say to you, love is what America needs, what pops into your head? And there is no right or wrong here. There is no judgment. I really just want to sort of stream of consciousness hear what you have to say. So
that's all I know how to do.
Go ahead.
So my mom, I interviewed her once for an article when I was in college in a child development class, because my mom was, to me, the best parent. And I asked her what her parenting philosophy was, and this was well before I had kids or even the thought of them. And she said she didn't know it was this formula until she was spinning it out to me that she had abided by. It's not like she intentionally wrote down a formula and then parented that way. But she said, you have to have love, which has to be unconditional. Mm-hmm. And then you add that to expectations, which are different for each of your children, because all your children are different. And you cannot expect, they have different skills and different struggles. And so you can't have the same expectations for them. But expectations are important. And then you add that together with limits, which are the same for all of them and have to be consistent. Boundaries have to be consistent. She goes, you add all that together, and I think you get the starts of a healthy human being. And so sometimes, what I love, I feel like America needs my mom's algorithm for
I'm with you.
That part of approaching the table. And you talked about to be and being. Being is the verb that I have found in any language I've ever studied or heard is always the exception to the rule in language. And it's the very name that God calls God's self in the text. Tell them I am sent you, when he was calling God was calling Moses to go let Pharaoh let the people go. Tell them I am sent you. And then Jesus, of course, had all the I am statements in the Second Testament. And so that idea, and being, it's the exception to the rule in all languages, that idea of being, I think, is a constant, continuous, ancient human struggle. And part of being is also letting other people be. And if we can do that, to realize we have limits when my being interferes with your being, that's where some of the limit comes in. I don't think it's possible to say we love people if we have no expectations of them. But may they be realistic expectations, and that includes the people who make our laws. If I'm in a health crisis, I cannot be expected to make decisions about the type of healthcare plan that's best for me and my family. But if you are a lawmaker who's not in a healthcare crisis, then I expect that you will act in a manner that is not benefiting just you, but is the most beneficial to the people whom you serve. And that will show how you love unconditionally. So I feel like if we were we all strive in our own corners to be and let others be and you can implement that. If you don't know how, then my mom's algorithm is a good implementation tool. I feel like then I think we would be better off.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah. And I want to meet your mom.
Sorry, she passed away. I would love for you to meet her, but but maybe in a different world and a different lifetime. You can meet her through the stories I'll share.
I can meet her through siblings also.
Yes.
And see how she's embodied in each one of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I heard your question, one of my most memorable moments as a reporter came. I was covering a debate, race for Congress, 5 years ago, or actually longer than that, about 7 years ago, and it was Mike Arcuri versus Richard Hanna. They were locked in this bitter congressional race, and the debate was at Cayuga Community College in the afternoon. Earlier in the day, they had one, I believe, in Cortland or Utica, and it was brutal. It was they really wanted at each other's throats, and there was an awkward moment before the CCC debate in which they were standing a few feet apart and just wouldn't acknowledge, like, they were that angry with each other. But funny thing happened during the debate, which was the recording of the debate, it malfunctioned. And so they had to cut taping. Something had happened in the back. There was all this chaos. And so here are the two candidates sitting at a table about 2 feet apart with nothing to do as they figured this out. And so all of a sudden one, I can't remember which, turns to the other and says, how's your family doing? And it didn't take long for them both to pull out pictures. And the table is covered with pictures of their wives and the children, and they're talking and smiling, and you just look at that and say, yeah, that's the solution to our political problems. It really boils down to that here are two guys that they were debating really about important issues, but getting into the weeds a little bit. And what really needed to kind of tone down the rhetoric was to remember that they're both human beings.
Yeah.
And they have families, and they have certainly concerns that they can relay to people and relate to people with. And that to me was significant in telling that story, that we need to remember that no matter what side of an issue you're on, no matter what your position is, that you need to remember that there's other people, and you need to take into consideration what their feelings are, what their views are. Sit down, have a dialogue, and remember that there's it's a cliche almost at this point, but there's more that unites us than divides us. That we're people first, and we have families, we have other passions outside of politics. So to me, that's the way you inject more love, I suppose, into America.
I love it. Thank you. I wrote that down. There's more that unites us than divides us. We're people first, right? Yeah. Well, thank you both for that answer. As I head into 2018, one of the things that I focused on in 2017 with a number of different communities, my business, my friends, my colleagues in a couple of different associations, was on kind of owning our own stories and really getting clear on our own internal navigation, right? So if we take away those external mileposts I was talking about before, and we focus on these things, right, which are our values, really, right? Life becomes a lot more clear. So heading into 2018, what I'm really excited about for me personally is this topic, which is, I feel like love is my legacy for 2018. Like, I want to learn how to embody it in every area of my life, and to share that. And there's no better time than now, right? This article really hit home for me, and I'd love to get a copy to both of you because I think you would enjoy it. And I so appreciate both of your reflections. All right, well, we're getting close to wrapping up today. We were here with Rob Harding from the Citizen in Auburn, New York, and Reverend Leah Ntuala from First Presbyterian Church of Seneca Falls. The last couple of things we want to share with you, I often share something out and about in the community before we wrap up, and this particular time, obviously, coming upon the holidays, we could talk about that, but there's so much of that out there. We just had a spectacular It's a Wonderful Life weekend here in Seneca Falls, but I would like to turn our attention to the Women March in Seneca Falls, taking place on January 20th at 10 a.m. There's going to be an incredible lineup of speakers to come and listen to a number of different issues that are pervasive and ongoing. And actually, I would love to hear your reflections, Leah, just on the development of the group that is putting this march together and the impact, the message that is being sent out there with this march.
So last year, a group of us pulled together by Melania. We came and she said, I want to have a march here in Seneca Falls. And the planning started very, very late.
Like December, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yet still, the weather was gorgeous. And we had 10,000 plus people here, which is more than are in Seneca Falls. Hearing the news that you shut down an exit ramp on a freeway is pretty empowering. It makes you feel awesome and small all at the same time. So it's this same group of awesome women, along with a few others who have come now to the table, and we continue to push forward and plan, realizing that there were a lot of setbacks for women. This tax bill has a few more in it, hidden in it. Women are very regulated gender, and and as a woman, part of what you don't like about that is the being treated almost like a kid who doesn't know what to do with their own self. Mm-hmm. And so to not feel like you can own yourself is very frustrating. To not feel like there are people looking out for your best interest, or they think they are. With reproductive health, it's super complicated. Every woman I know has a different story, none alike in terms of our reproductive health. And so having people make decisions on it as though it is the same for every single person is really daunting. And it what I love about this group of women, and I love about this Women's March, is these issues don't care your political party or your personal opinion on social issues. They affect you whether you belong to those groups or not. Mm-hmm. Our society, I strongly feel, is weakened when we do not empower all people.
Right.
And so this is a group of women who have said, we want to do that. We want to educate people on why these issues matter. And we're going to keep being loud. Because we do have places that we speak from. We do have voices, and we're going to use them, even if every single issue we talk about is not applicable to our own lives. Because it is applicable to somebody's life, it's therefore important.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I attended the march last year, and I attended as a new mom, and I had my son Jack with me. He was strapped to me. It was such a beautiful day.
It was.
The most striking feeling that I left with was that very message you're talking about, which is that everyone was welcome. Mm-hmm. Everyone was welcome to that table. Starting with, I think what hit me most was knowing some community members and then hearing them widen their own lenses, right? So having Becky Bly really speak very pointedly to the idea that, if you're here to, bash the president or to, be angry about something, there's room for anger and passion and all of those things, but we're here to come together over these issues for all of us. And it was just incredible to be part of that energy. And it was even more incredible to be invited by Melina to come this year and sit at the table with all of you in the planning process. I absorb so much from all of the spirits at that table, and to be able to find my own voice among you it's just been incredible. So thank you. I'm looking forward to the march this year. I want to hear from Rob what it was like, because you came to interview this group. Mm-hmm. And as a man, obviously you're not worried about your own reproductive rights, right? But you are so good at keeping that wide lens. But what was it like walking into this room of like pretty strong, incredible women at the table?
Well, fortunately for me, I'm used to that. I have 6 sisters.
Beautiful.
And
you were born for this.
And my mom is my biggest role model in life. She had me when she was 18, and even still today, we talk multiple times a week about just life, what's happening, and every now and then she'll throw a little nugget of something that concerns her with the political scene. So I keep that in the back of my mind as I go forward. But yeah, it was an impressive room. I mean, you're talking all different ages, different backgrounds, in terms of professional or personal. And what I, as a journalist, what I enjoyed is that no one was shy about giving their 2 cents about the issues of the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have roundtables like that, and you have a few people who lead the discussion, and then there's some other people that just kind of defer. But no, everybody brought their views to the forefront, which to me was the beauty of the whole thing. That and really, I think, shows what the freedom of assembly and the Women's March and similar rallies have really shown that you have a voice, so use it.
Yeah.
And speak out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to note, so this ties back to the very thing I was telling you I admire about you, Leah. The moment that you spoke in the room was when everyone followed, became comfortable. So all the voices were at the table. It's that gift of being able to hold space for other people and have your own voice. Because what I see often, what you're talking about, Rob, and I see this so often interviewing groups, is there's a question about the dynamic, and the sort of pecking order of who's at the table. Should I speak on behalf of this group, or should I wait until this person speaks, or should I wait until this person speaks? And the fact that you jumped right in, Melina jumped right in, it just gives permission, to be present, to be fully present. There was no question, and so everyone's just fully at the table, which is what we need more of in this life. We need the ability to have difficult conversations. We need the ability to merge things like we did today. We're bringing together religion, we're bringing together politics, and I'm so grateful for both of you. We're just going to wrap it up with a little bit of ideas and inspiration for our viewers. If you didn't get enough already, the last thing that I want to share with you is just to remember to stay present during the holidays. This is a time of year that gets so busy, and we get busy doing the very opposite of the thing I talked about earlier. We get busy doing instead of being. And when we're busy doing, we forget about being. And then all of a sudden, this beautiful time passes that we have available to us to really connect with our families, our communities, our loved ones. So stay present, whatever that takes. If it takes, giving yourself a 5-minute timeout, or practicing some good meditation or self-care practices that keep you in the moment. Because the moments are the very thing that matters. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed our interviews with Rob Harding from The Citizen and Leah Ntuala from the First Presbyterian Church of Seneca Falls, and I look forward to seeing you again next month.